He told the world he was flying out for a business conference. Then he quietly slipped back into his own mansion, like a burglar, ready to catch his nanny in the act. Graham Whitmore hated uncertainty. Since his wife Diane passed away, his life had turned into a grid, schedules, rules, and a silence so strict it felt like a law. He'd fired 4 nannies in 6 months, 1 for being 5 minutes late, 1 for checking her phone while feeding the twins, 1 simply because her laugh sounded too loud in a grieving house. Then came the new nanny Chloe, young, unpolished, and according to the trusted housekeeper, Mrs. Hargrove, the wrong kind of girl. That morning, Mrs. Hargrove leaned in and whispered, "Sir, the boys don't cry when you're gone. Babies always cry. If they're not crying, she's either drugging them or terrifying them." Those words lit a fuse in Graham's chest. So he staged a trip, carried a briefcase for show, and returned minutes later, locks already oiled the night before, no squeak, no warning. In his mind, he'd walk into chaos, neglect, proof. He stepped inside, held his breath and listened. He didn't hear crying. He didn't hear a TV. He heard something worse, something that felt like an insult to his grief. Laughter. Deep, rhythmic, unstoppable laughter coming from the living room. His 1-year-old twins, Owen and Caleb, laughing like they hadn't laughed in a year. Graham's stomach tightened. Curiosity collided with panic. He moved down the hallway, every step saying the same thing. If they're happy without me, what does that make me? Graham didn't rush in. He stalked the sound like it was evidence. He'd oiled the locks himself the night before, quiet hands, careful work, like a man preparing a sting, not a homecoming. Now the front door swung inward without a squeak, and he stepped into the foyer with his briefcase hanging at his side like a prop in a bad play. On paper, he was supposed to be 30,000 feet in the air, headed to a conference. In reality, he was standing on his own marble tile, holding his breath, listening for the disaster Mrs. Hargrove had promised. "Babies always cry," her warning echoed in his head. If they don't, something's wrong. The house looked perfect. Too perfect. That museum clean silence he demanded after Diane died. Graham set the briefcase down gently, as if a loud thud might wake the grief he'd been sleeping beside for a year. He expected the twins wailing. He expected the TV blaring. He expected Chloe sprawled on the couch phone, glowing in her face, his boys ignored like background noise. Instead, the laughter hit him again, full-bodied wild, the kind that makes your stomach ache from smiling. Owen, Caleb, his sons were laughing without him. Graham's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios anyway. What is she doing to make them laugh like that? He moved down the hallway on careful steps. The polished floor cold under his shoes, the sound growing louder with each stride. And with every step, another thought pressed in, sharp and humiliating. If Chloe can pull joy out of my children that easily, then what have I been doing wrong this whole time? Halfway down the hallway, Graham caught himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He slowed down, almost afraid to ruin whatever was happening. Mrs. Hargrove's voice kept clawing at him anyway. Too young, too loud, too vulgar. The woman had said it with that syrupy concern that always sounded like loyalty. And Graham, raw, widowed, and addicted to control, had swallowed it like medicine. He'd convinced himself this was a rescue mission. But the closer he got, the stranger it felt. The laughter wasn't forced. It wasn't nervous. It was the kind of laughter that comes from pure safety. He reached the living room threshold and stopped dead. The room, usually spotless beige and silent, looked like a tiny riot had happened. Toys scattered. Sunlight flooding in. And there, in the center of it all, was Chloe, not sitting neatly with a picture book, not warming bottles. She was stretched out flat on the rug, grinning up at the ceiling like she didn't have a care in the world. On her hands, bright yellow rubber gloves, the kind you'd use to scrub a sink. "Up my brave boys," she cheered. Owen and Caleb, his 1-year-old twins, were standing on her. Literally standing on her chest and stomach, wobbling like tiny daredevils. Owen threw his arms up like he'd climbed a mountain. Caleb, his smaller twin, the one doctors worried about, was trembling but upright, laughing with his whole face. To anyone else it would have looked like love. To Graham, filtered through grief and pride, it looked like chaos. Like disrespect, like danger. His stomach twisted. And in that instant he didn't see two happy babies. He saw a stranger on his floor, turning his sons into a circus. Graham's face went hot. His pulse climbed into his throat. And the worst part, his sons weren't just laughing, they were laughing at full volume in the one room he'd kept like a shrine. "Chloe." His voice came out low and sharp, like a judge saying a sentence. The spell didn't break right away. Chloe made a ridiculous airplane sound, and Owen and Caleb exploded again. Those deep belly laughs that feel almost violent. Graham's hands curled into fists. In his head he saw germs on those yellow gloves. He saw a fall, a cracked skull, an ambulance racing up his long driveway. He saw the headlines he'd never forgive himself for. "How dare you," he whispered, stepping forward. "How dare you turn my house into this?" Chloe finally noticed him. Her smile faltered for half a second, just long enough for the twins to feel the shift. Two tiny faces went from joy to alarm, like someone flipped a switch. Caleb turned his head too fast. His little legs wobbled. His balance vanished. He tipped right toward the hardwood. Careful Graham lunged, but he was too far. Chloe wasn't. She moved like a reflex, not a worker on the clock. One yellow-gloved hand shot up and caught Caleb mid-air, cradling his head against her chest. Her other arm hooked Owen at the waist and pulled him in tight. In one smooth motion, she rolled up to sitting, both boys pressed safely to her body, breathing hard. The twins started crying, sharp, panicked, betrayed. Graham stormed in and snatched Owen away. "Let go of my children!" he barked, voice shaking with fury and fear. "What kind of madness is this?" Chloe stayed on the floor, hands empty, eyes wide, still trembling. And Graham, blinded by grief and control, couldn't see what she'd just proven. She hadn't risked his sons. She'd saved them. Graham's eyes flicked to Owen on the couch, small fists punching the cushion, face wet and red. Then to Caleb, arching in his arms like he was trying to escape a stranger. And that's exactly what it felt like. "Go," Graham hissed, voice clipped and final. "To your room, pack your things, and take those ridiculous gloves off. This is a serious house, not a circus." Chloe swallowed hard. She slid the yellow gloves off slowly, like she was peeling away a part of herself, revealing hands that looked worked, raw. She didn't argue. Not for pride, not for dignity. She just looked at the boys one last time. Owen reached for her anyway. Nah. He cried, little arms stretching toward the woman Graham had just condemned. That sound hit Graham like a slap. He turned his head, jaw tight, and set Caleb down. But the second Chloe took one step toward the service hall, the twins' crying changed. It wasn't tantrum crying. It was abandonment crying, the kind that makes the walls feel smaller. "Enough!" Graham snapped, trying to gather them up like a man collecting spilled papers. He bounced Caleb. He patted Owen's back. He whispered the kind of empty comfort he'd heard other people say. Nothing worked. Caleb kicked his suit jacket with tiny fists. Owen twisted away like the couch was safer than his father's arms. And Graham, millionaire dealmaker man, who could bend markets with a phone call, stood there, helpless, sweating, listening to his own home turn into a siren. At the end of the hallway, Mrs. Hargrove watched from the shadows, and if you looked closely, you could see it. A thin smile. Like she'd been waiting for this all along. The mansion didn't calm down after Chloe left. It got worse. Owen's screams bounced off the high ceilings like an alarm that couldn't be shut off. Caleb arched backward in Graham's arms, face blotchy, tiny fists, pounding a suit that suddenly felt like armor made of glass. Graham tried everything, rocking, shushing, pacing the rug, like a man negotiating with a storm. "Daddy's here," he muttered, voice cracking on the word here. But to two one-year-olds, he wasn't here. He was unfamiliar. Cold cologne. Stiff fabric. No warmth on the floor. No silly airplane noises. No safe arms that smelled like soap and patience. Enough, Graham barked, and even he heard how weak it sounded. That's when Mrs. Hargrove appeared. She didn't walk in so much as glide, perfect gray uniform hair pinned tight, a silver tray in her hands, with a glass of ice water clinking softly, calm in the middle of chaos. Too calm. Sir, she purred, setting the tray down like this was tea service, not heartbreak. You look pale. I told you this would happen. Graham grabbed the glass. His hand was shaking. They won't stop, he whispered. What did she do to them? Mrs. Hargrove leaned closer, eyes soft, voice sweet. What did she do? She spoiled them, turned them wild. Her gaze flicked toward Owen's smeared face, then back to Graham. A girl like that, she loves seeing you lose control. Poor girls do. Makes them feel powerful. Graham swallowed. The mention of Diane's name came next, quiet, deliberate. She wants your boys to forget their mother, Mrs. Hargrove murmured. To forget their father. Something hardened in Graham's chest. He set the glass down, straightened his tie, and stood up like a verdict had just been reached. You're right, he said, voice flat. This ends today. And Mrs. Hargrove's smile, barely there, deepened as Graham marched toward the service hall to finish what she started. Graham found Chloe at the end of the service hallway, in a room so small it felt like the mansion was ashamed of it. Her beat-up duffel lay open on the narrow bed. She wasn't sobbing over losing a paycheck. She was listening to the twins' cries, slicing through the walls, each nana landing like a blade. Graham didn't knock. He filled the doorway like a storm. You done? He asked, voice ice-cold. I'm packing, sir. Just a minute, Chloe whispered, clutching a t-shirt to her chest like armor. His eyes caught a crayon scribble taped to the wall, Owen's messy little drawing. Chloe had saved it like it mattered. Graham tore it down in one violent yank, crushed it in his fist, and dropped it like trash. Don't take anything that isn't yours, he said. In this house, even memories belong to the family. Chloe's cheeks flared red. He gave me that, she breathed. It's just paper. For you, it's a trophy, Graham snapped. Then he pulled out a thick wad of cash and tossed it onto the bed without counting. Bills slid to the floor. There, a month's pay and more. Take it and disappear. If you contact my sons again, I'll call the police. My attorneys will bury you. Chloe stared at the money like it was dirty. Then she lifted her chin. Insult me all you want, she said, voice shaking but steady. Call me cheap, poor, wrong. But don't lie to yourself. What you saw wasn't a circus. It was love. Graham's jaw clenched. Your boys aren't hungry for expensive toys, Chloe went on. Eyes wet. They're hungry for someone who'll get on the floor with them. Caleb stood up today because he trusted I wouldn't let him fall. She swallowed. If they fall, will you catch them? Or will you worry about your shirt? The silence hit like a punch. Graham pointed to the door. Out! Now! Graham walked back toward the living room like a man returning from a war he swore he'd won, only to find the battlefield still screaming. Owen and Caleb were still on the couch, both of them red-faced, drenched in tears. Not the fussy kind. Not the I want a cookie kind. This was something older. Something deeper. Owen slammed his tiny fists into the cushion like it had betrayed him. Caleb twisted in Graham's arms, arching away with a strength that didn't match his size, reaching toward the hallway where Chloe had disappeared. Graham tried to sit, tried to hold them right, tried to copy the gentle bounce he'd seen other fathers do in grocery store lines. But the babies treated him like a stranger in a suit-cold fabric-sharp cologne, stiff hands that didn't know their rhythm. And then Mrs. Hargrove drifted back into the room. She moved with the calm of a woman who loved order more than children. One glance at Owen's tears, one glance at Graham's shaking jaw, and her mouth softened into that careful, poisonous sympathy. See, she murmured, standing just close enough to be heard over the crying. This is what she does. She stirs them up, then leaves you to deal with the mess. Graham swallowed hard, eyes burning. They've never been like this. Mrs. Hargrove tilted her head. Because she's made herself their comfort, she said softly. That girl doesn't know her place. Girls like that, they want what isn't theirs. Her gaze flicked to the framed photo of Diane on the mantel, beautiful, untouchable, gone. Then she lowered her voice like a confession. She wants to be the mother, Mrs. Hargrove whispered. And if you let her stay, your boys will forget who their father is. Graham's chest tightened, grief turning into something sharp and ugly. In the next room, Chloe's footsteps faded. In this one, Mrs. Hargrove's lie finally took root. Graham finally found Chloe again near the back hallway, her duffel at her feet, her shoulders pulled tight, like she was bracing for another hit. The twins' cries still tore through the mansion, and you could see it on her face. She wasn't hearing noise. She was hearing need. "Don't you dare!" Graham snapped, more to steady himself than to stop her. "You turned them into this." Chloe didn't flinch. She looked up slowly, eyes glossy but locked in like a nurse staring down a stubborn fever. "Sir?" "They were laughing," she said, voice low, not pleading any more firm. "They haven't laughed like that in months. You heard it. You just couldn't stand it." Graham's jaw tightened. "Laughter isn't discipline." Chloe stepped closer. Careful, respectful, like you approach a wounded animal. "Your boys are hungry," she said. "Not for expensive toys. Not for imported clothes. They're hungry for someone who gets down on the floor and meets them where they are." The words landed hard because they were simple. Graham tried to speak, but his throat closed. Chloe kept going quieter now, almost maternal. "You think you fired me for being messy, but you fired me because it hurts to watch a stranger give them what you won't let yourself give." She swallowed. "You're not a bad father, Mr. Whitmore. You're a scared one." Graham's eyes flashed. "You don't know my pain." Chloe nodded once. "I know your son," she said. "Caleb doesn't stand because he's lazy. He doesn't stand because he's afraid. Today he stood on me because he trusted I'd catch him." Her voice cracked just slightly. "If they fall, sir, will you be there? Or will you be worried about your shirt wrinkling?" For the first time, Graham didn't answer, because somewhere deep down he already knew. Graham's pride tried to stand tall, but his house was falling apart around him. Caleb's coughing had started again, wet, panicked, the kind that turns a baby's face purple and makes time feel cruel. Graham held him wrong, too stiff, too frantic. He tried the trick Chloe mentioned, small circles on the back, steady pressure, yet Caleb only fought harder, choking on his own sobs. "Fine," Graham said through clenched teeth, voice cracking. "If you're so sure, prove it." Chloe didn't celebrate the challenge. She didn't smirk. She simply nodded once like a professional walking into a disaster zone. "Back to the living room," she said. "And if this works, don't clap, don't shout, just watch." They returned to the wrecked calm of the room. Blocks scattered, couch cushions. Crooked. Owen sniffling on the sofa like his heart had been bruised. From the doorway, Mrs. Hargrove hovered silent, now eyes sharp as needles. Chloe knelt on the beige rug and set Caleb down gently. His legs trembled inside his little denim overalls, knees dipping inward like they didn't trust themselves. He reached for Chloe's uniform, whimpering. "You're okay," she whispered. Hands hovering an inch from his sides, close enough to catch him, far enough to let him try. "Look at me, sweetheart. You're strong. You're a giant." Graham's breath stopped. His fingers dug into his own arms. Chloe slid backward on her knees, opening her arms. The distance was barely 3 feet, nothing for an adult. A canyon for a child everyone had labeled limited. Caleb stared at her, then at the floor, then back at her, smile, no pity, only belief. And then, like the world tilted, he lifted one foot. It slammed down clumsy and loud. Another step, another. Graham didn't move. He couldn't, because his son was walking. The room was still vibrating from the miracle Caleb in Chloe's arms, Owen clapping through sniffles when Mrs. Hargrove struck like a blade. "Well," she said, with a thin smile, stepping forward, walking is one thing, decency is another. Her eyes slid to Graham, then to the hallway like she was choosing her moment. "Sir, remember what's missing from Diane's safe." Graham froze. The air went cold. "What are you talking about?" he rasped. Mrs. Hargrove lowered her voice, dripping poison. "The diamond butterfly brooch. The one you guard like it's your wife's heartbeat. It's gone." She pointed at Chloe like a verdict. And she's the only one who goes near your office. Chloe's face drained. I never touched your safe, she said, steady but shaking. Never. Mrs. Hargrove didn't blink. Then let us look, she pressed. If she's honest, she won't mind. Graham's heart twisted. The miracle was undeniable. But the accusation hit a darker place, his grief, his fear of being played. He walked to Chloe's worn duffel sitting near the entryway. Owen's little hand flew to his mouth. Caleb tightened against Chloe's shoulder. Do it yourself, Chloe whispered, chin lifted. Not her. Don't let her touch my things. Graham flipped the bag onto the glass coffee table. Out fell a battered hairbrush, 2 pairs of mended white socks, a generic pill bottle for high blood pressure, and a laminated photo, an older woman in a wheelchair smiling warmly. No jewelry, no riches, no stolen life. Graham picked up the photo. On the back, shaky handwriting read, So you remember who you're fighting for, sweetheart. His stomach dropped. Mrs. Hargrove lunged in frantic. Impossible. Check again. Check her uniform. She's clever. Graham's voice cracked like thunder. Enough. And for the first time, the housekeeper's smile disappeared. Mrs. Hargrove backed up 1 step, but Graham didn't. He stood there with Chloe's photo still in his hand, proof of a life built on sacrifice, not theft, and something inside him finally cracked. Not anger, shame. Chloe didn't gloat. She just held Caleb close, rubbing slow circles on his back, the way she'd tried to teach Graham. Owen pressed against her leg like she was the only safe thing left in the room. And Graham saw it clear as daylight. The woman he trusted with his house had been poisoning his heart, while the woman he judged had been healing his children. Graham's voice came out rough. Chloe, take the boys upstairs. Close the door. His eyes never left Mrs. Hargrove. And cover their ears. Mrs. Hargrove's lips parted, ready to spin another lie, until Graham reached into his pocket and lifted his phone. I have cameras, he said softly, and I've been watching. The color drained from her face. Because the real trap wasn't Chloe on the floor. It was Mrs. Hargrove thinking no one would ever look behind the curtain. Sometimes the loudest professional in the room isn't the safest person, especially when they're feeding your fear. And sometimes the person you underestimate is the one quietly holding your family together. If you're a parent or grandparent watching this, remember, kids don't need perfection. They need presence. Get down on the floor. Wrinkle the shirt. Be the safe place. If this story hit you somewhere deep, tell me in the comments. When did you realize love matters more than control? And don't forget, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the real wealth in a home is the laughter inside it.